to Practical Paula's Sunday school class. And it seems like it has been a lifetime since I have stood on this platform and addressed you. The last time I spoke in this forum was on March 8th. And since that time, our entire world has changed. I only speak every fifth Sunday because we have great speakers that fill this platform, like Brother Charles, Brother Jeremy, Natalie, Brother Daniel. And so I've enjoyed listening to them. And it seemed like in the past that my turn just came up really quick. But so much has happened since March the 8th. On March the 8th, the last time I stood here, I lived in America, land of the free and home of the brave. But as I stand before you today, just 5 weeks later, our freedoms can be counted on our fingers. This past Thursday morning during my visit with God, I began journaling my feelings, and I wrote, I feel as though I am walking through another country, a communist or a socialist country. I've never visited a communist country, but I have been to several socialist ones. And what you will find there is what you find here, the bare minimum on the shelves at the grocery stores. Unavailable items with no guaranteed delivery date. Neighbors turning in neighbors to the police. Heightened government control. They all speak the language of the countries that I only visited or read about. We are allowed to go to the grocery store, or the pharmacy, or the doctor, or get takeout food from a restaurant, or we can check on or bring supplies to a friend or family member as long as we don't touch them. We can go outside and exercise as long as we stay 6 feet away from any other human being. And we can also walk our pets. But all allowable activities must be done between the hours of 5 a.m. and 9 p.m. On social media, I see people gleefully applauding the extensive measures of the government while not understanding that their liberties, like mine, have been stripped away. And no one is guaranteeing us when those liberties will return. Someone posted on Friday, and I borrowed it, I hope they can revoke the stay-at-home order before July 4th so that we can celebrate our freedom. As I watched COVID-19 play out on news channels and social media, I thought, what would the Easter story look like had it occurred today? This past week, I took literary license and I rewrote my version of the gospel of Jesus Christ, not according to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, although I do refer to their writings for my facts. But today, I'm going to tell you the gospel according to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat. This is just my version. And I think that the disciples, had they lived today, would have had all forms of social media, but they would have been the most likely to post on Twitter. So it was that forum that John tried to give us a heads up that something was on the horizon. Someone was among us who was different, and we didn't know it. John's first tweet said, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and all things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. In him was the life, and the life was the light of men, and the light shines in darkness, but the darkness did not comprehend it. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were all tweeting about the life of Jesus Christ, and each one tweeted similar stories, but one thing was the same in all four Gospels. Matthew's tweet read, for a while now, Jesus has been telling us that he has to go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and the chief priests and be killed and raised on the third day. And if you followed Matthew, you would have seen this post. Jesus told us that he, the Son of Man, is about to be betrayed into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and the third day he will be raised up. And Mark had this to say on the matter. He said, Jesus taught us that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. Dr. Luke's tweet was straight and to the point as well. And he said, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed and be raised the third day. Lastly, John quotes Jesus saying, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. But none of them really understood what was about to take place. For the sake of time, I'm going to start my story with the story of Judas, one of the 12 disciples turning on Jesus. Judas had spent a lot of time with him over the past 3 years, and he had noticed the decline in Jesus' popularity. Judas had his own issues to deal with. You see, Judas was Jesus' chief financial advisor and secretly had been stealing more than the agreed upon commission. He constantly questioned how Jesus spent the money, and he even posted on Facebook about the waste of costly oil that was intentionally spilled on Jesus' feet by Mary. In that post, in an effort to gain social sympathy, Judas gave facts about how many poor people could have been helped if the oil would have been sold and the money distributed. The comments under his post applauded his accusations and encouraged him to expose Jesus for who he truly was, the taker, the stealer of the limelight, totally oblivious to the people he claimed to be concerned about. After reading the comments in the heat of his emotional turmoil, Judas put Jesus' capture on Facebook Marketplace. And a bid was made and accepted, and during an all-night prayer meeting, Judas led a group of policemen to the place where Jesus was. He knew exactly where to go because Jesus had met his disciples there regularly. Judas knew the routine. He knew it better than anyone. And Instagram and Facebook lit up as pictures and posts were submitted. Everybody wanted to improve their social ratings by getting in on the action. The picture that was shared the most that night was the one of Judas kissing Jesus on the cheek. But Judas's fame and notoriety was short-lived, and within hours, he was trying to return the money he had been paid. One of the elders of the church gleefully posted about the scenario of Judas's regret. The church elder boasted that although he had used some of his own money to pay for Jesus' capture, all of the money had been returned. The next day, there was a small article in the daily newspaper about the death of Judas Iscariot. Judas had taken his own life by hanging himself, but the media blamed Jesus for the death. The headlines were soon ablaze with pictures and reports of Jesus' capture and mock trial. Those who had been plotting for weeks and months shared the media footage on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, adding their own twist to the story. Finally, their complaints had reached the ears of government, and something would be done about this person who had defied their laws and teachings. If they got their way, this remorseless Jesus, who at one time had thousands of followers, would have to delete every social media account. The night before Jesus' capture, when he was supposed to have been praying, Peter tweeted a passionate claim of his undying love and devotion to Jesus. This tweet was a result of Jesus telling him that he, Peter, would deny him 3 times before the sun came up. In true form, hot-headed, emotionally driven Peter grabbed his iPhone and made sure people knew that he was loyal to Jesus Christ. But later, as Peter tried to follow Jesus during his trial, he became aware of the massive amount of people who sought to have Jesus convicted. Peter's thoughts were scattered as he tried to understand how could people go from following Jesus and calling after him to claiming that he was responsible for everything that was going on in their world. In just a matter of days, Jesus had gone from riding a donkey in the biggest parade of the century to being arrested, publicly beaten, and spat upon. Peter desperately wanted to do something to help, but he had never had to be the leader. Jesus had always led the way and given the instructions. Not knowing if he would be arrested next, he tried to blend in with the crowd. But a couple of teenagers who had attended some of Jesus' sermons and had been eyewitness to miracles were Snapchatting with their friends. They were excited about being allowed to stay out after curfew and be a part of this historic event. And suddenly they recognized Peter and they try to get a picture with him. And he not only refuses to take a picture, but he adamantly denies that he even knows Jesus. Peter rushes away from the teenagers and he joins another group. And there, amidst the chaos of the crowd, he tries again to blend in. But a Facebook post accompanied by the picture of the scenario automatically tags him and he gets an alert. Hurrying to delete the tag from the picture, he hears a rooster crowing in the distance. Feeling alone and defeated, Peter moves back as far as he can from the crowd, but close enough to watch the pandemic begin to escalate. He has failed. He is guilty. And Luke's tweet said Peter eventually went home and wept bitterly. Too far away to hear what was actually being said, Peter had to rely on social media for updates. And his heart began to sink as he sees post after post from people who were once followers of Jesus Christ begin to sell him out. Their claims were not verified, but the amount of attention they were receiving fueled their justification to continue with their accusations. Their followers liked, shared, and retweeted their posts. The followers didn't understand that each time they did that, they were casting their vote to condemn an innocent man. Pilate tweeted about Jesus' innocence. His wife even had put something on Facebook about a dream she had had, both of them pleading with an irrational crowd to release Jesus. Pilate figured out that the religious people's accusations against Jesus were simply out of envy. In an effort to keep his public opinion poll at an all-time high, Pilate offers the crowd an option. He would release one prisoner, and they could choose which one it was. In an effort to get them to choose Jesus, Pilate brings out the convict who has harmed the most people. He remembered the celebration and the notoriety he had received when Barabbas was finally captured. People had taken pictures of the arrest, tagging Pilate and thanking him for getting a child molester, a rapist, and a murderer off the streets. Their families were safe again, and people were able to sleep peacefully at night. Surely they would not choose Barabbas. But the unreasonable crowd began chanting for Barabbas to be released and for Jesus to be crucified. The hashtag #GiveUsBarabbas accompanied every Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram post. It was apparent that the mob was more concerned with stopping the spread of the influence of Jesus Christ than loosing a known criminal back into the public. When Pilate saw that a pandemic was unfolding before him, he washed his hands before the multitude and declared his innocence of the blood of Jesus Christ. Pictures of him washing his hands flooded social media as one person after another gleefully accepted responsibility for Jesus' conviction. The media applauded the actions of the religious leaders, commending them for being able to squelch any hope that Jesus Christ had promised. Not only that, but through social shaming, they were successful in getting his followers to forsake him and go into social isolation. As Peter and the rest of the disciples watched their news feed, they were horrified to see posts showing Jesus being stripped and covered with a scarlet robe. They went and wailed as they saw the crown of thorns on his head and the images of their bleeding leader being mocked as he was handed a reed, and one person after another posted a picture of themselves bowing down before this dethroned king of the Jews. Guttural sobs overtook his followers as they witnessed via social media the bloody, beaten body of Jesus dragging his own cross towards Golgotha. His face was unrecognizable. Their tears streamed down their faces as new pictures surfaced of someone they had never met who was suddenly carrying his cross for him. Another post tagged and identified the cross bearer as Simon of Cyrene. Unable to bear the pictures and the videos any longer, the disciples turned off their phones and waited. Open doors and windows gave way to the cheers and screams as hammers sent nails through hands and feet before piercing the wood of the cross. Some had access to the view on the hill. 3 crosses, 3 thieves. The one in the middle had stolen their sins. Their hearts felt as though they would beat out of their chest. How could so much have happened in so little time? Was everything they had been taught a lie? Had the enemies of Jesus Christ actually won? The jeering crowd was still updating the events on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat. One picture was posted of Mary, Jesus' mother, sobbing near the foot of the cross. And the line read, "I heard she was pregnant with him before she was married." Another picture of her pained, tear-stained face did its best to tear her down even more. She's here without her husband and her other children. How embarrassing for them. Why doesn't she just go home and leave him? One of the chief priests tweeted, "He saved others, but he could not save himself." The tweet was quickly shared by the scribes and the elders. Smugly, they patted each other on the back, confident that he could never again save anyone else. His clothing was sold on eBay, fulfilling the scripture, "They divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots." The media coverage, they covered the execution extremely well. Every channel talked only of the extinction of Jesus Christ. Only one small conservative newspaper reported that a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph had also become a disciple of Jesus, and he had gone to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Joseph wrapped Jesus' body with a sanitized linen cloth and selflessly buried him in a grave he had custom built for himself. He carefully sealed that grave with a custom-made stone. At a news briefing the next day, the chief priests and Pharisees gathered together with Pilate saying, "Sir, We remember when he was alive how that deceiver said, after 3 days I will rise. So can we set a curfew and call for the National Guard to watch his grave so his followers don't come during the night and steal his body and make a false claim that he rose from the dead? We have to make sure that all hope of him is completely extinguished. Pilate issued a mandate. Not only was the tomb guarded, but the tombstone covering was sealed with cement. And on that first Easter morning, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Jesus, were not in new Easter dresses, proudly sitting on the front row of their church. They were wearing mourning clothes and carrying fresh flowers to put on Jesus' grave. And although they had lost most of their followers on social media, they quickly posted graveside pictures of the scene that greeted them. In their collage of pictures, one was of a very tall man dressed in white and sitting on the empty grave. Another picture showed National Guard soldiers standing at attention but with a confused look on their faces. In Mary Magdalene's post, she recanted what the stranger on the tomb told her. He said, "Don't be afraid. I know you're looking for Jesus who was crucified, but he's not here. Check it out for yourself." And her next picture was of the empty grave. The women found Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, who quickly retweeted their post about his declaration to rise in 3 days. Now we know what it meant. For the sake of time, I've got to wrap up this lesson. So why did I take the time and rewrite the Easter story as if it would have happened in 2020? Because during the past few weeks, as the current pandemic has unfolded, I've had a whole lot of time to do some soul searching. And I've had to decide who and what to believe. And while I would love to say that if I had been alive when Jesus was arrested and crucified, I would have been one of the few who stood firmly by him the entire time. But I'm not so sure that that is true. As I unfollowed people who were using their social media platform to socially shame others, I thought, could I handle them socially shaming me? Would I have caved in and agreed to follow their philosophy, or would I have just hid until this was all over? The reason we have something to celebrate today is because Jesus Christ withstood social shaming and endured social distancing and could still look at his accusers and pray, "Father, forgive them, for they don't realize what they're doing." And in 50 days from today, we're going to celebrate Pentecost Sunday. This is the birthday of the church. Every Christian religion celebrates it. And as I was developing today's message, I went over the events before Pentecost Sunday, and I compared them with today's events. 2 weeks before that day, 2 weeks before Pentecost Sunday, a group of 120 who refused to bow to public opinion went into isolation. And for approximately 14 days, they prayed and they encouraged each other as they waited to be infected with power from on high. And the media coverage, though small, read this: and when the 2-week quarantine was over, they were all still in that tiny room, which could not have been that sanitary. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled that room where everyone was sitting. And they were all 120 filled with the Holy Ghost and began to speak with other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. And if you look it up, Jesus' mother Mary was in there too. And those 120, filled with boldness from the infilling of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, exited the building. And by the end of the day, they had infected over 3,000 more people. So whether or not I would have been a faithful believer at the foot of the cross will never be known. But today I am so thankful that I can celebrate that He lives. And He found me. And I have been infected with the same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead. And I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I can hold on to His promise in John 16, verse 32 and 33, which says, a time is coming, and in fact has come, when you will be scattered, each to your own home. I've told you these things so that in me you would have peace. In this world you will have COVID-19, but take heart. I have overcome the world. Good Friday was the enemy's massive attempt to stop the spread of the hope that Jesus Christ brings. But Easter is a celebration of Him defying politics, church leaders, social media, public opinion, death, hell, and the grave. And nothing can stop this hope as long as He's alive in me. We can be assured of His word, which says, but if the Spirit of Him who raised Jesus Christ from the dead dwells in you, He who raised Jesus from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies through His Spirit that dwells in you. I hope you have a reason today to celebrate. Happy Easter. He is not dead. He is risen.